If you're a Swiftie, this episode is for you. Dr. Natasha Riard is here to share how creativity, authenticity, and the pop princess herself drives her teaching and therapeutic practice. Professionally Psyched is the podcast that brings you cutting-edge psychology research and real-world insights from our psych community of clinicians, researchers, and educators alike. We're here to explore how psychology shapes our everyday lives and impacts the world around us. Hi everyone and welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Jessica Muller, PhD candidate in Public Health at James Cook University, and before we get started we'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we record, and for me today that's the Bindal and Wulgurukaba peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultures from wherever you may be tuning in from across the country. In this episode of Professionally Psyched, first-year psychology student Jon Hodgkin sits down with Dr. Natasha Riard, senior lecturer and self-described Swiftie, to explore the real-world transition from textbooks to therapy rooms, and how pop culture can spark powerful learning moments. So grab your headphones and get ready to get professionally psyched about embracing every era of your psychology journey. Enjoy.
Welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Jon Hodgkin, a first-year psychology student at JCU Townsville. Today, I have the absolute privilege of speaking with someone who's not only a pioneering clinical educator and award-winning innovator, but also pop culture trailblazer, turning blank spaces into teachable moments. Please welcome Dr. Natasha Riard.
Thank you so much, Jon. I am very happy to be here and I'm very ecstatic. I feel like that was the best intro I've ever received. So thank you for that.
Well, look, you can hire me and I'll just follow you around and introducing you anywhere you want to go.
Okay.
Now, if we could jump into a few questions. You wear a few different hats at JCU Singapore. Could you walk me through what you do there and what a typical day would look like?
Yes, I would love to. Well, firstly, I manage clinic operations, which, just means that I have to make sure that the clinic is up and running, that students are providing psychological services and clients are receiving them. I would say the bulk of my everyday role is in supervision and training, which I really love. Like, this is the reason I wake up in the morning. So there's lots of supervision, reviewing their videos, reports, session notes. I also teach a little bit in pre-placement workshops, which is a little bridge that helps students start to get ready for client interaction. And I'm also involved in community development. So recently I created a process-based intervention manual for counselors and other mental health professionals in the community to use with their adolescent clients. I just finished training nearly 400 professionals in the community in the use of this manual.
Well, that sounds like you're juggling a lot of roles, but it would be amazing to be one of your students, it sounds like. In saying that, I would love if we could rewind and take you back to when you were an undergraduate at Monash University. If you could go back in time and maybe walk us through the path that you've taken from undergrad student to where you are now, what was that like?
I think something interesting about my learning profile was that I didn't start out in psychology. So I just wanted to have fun. I was one of those students who's like, nah, boring, thank you, no more of physics and chemistry and the like. And I went into mass communication. So that was fun because it was like acting, like marketing and all these cool things, right, that you want to do as like a 17, 18, 19-year-old. So then after that, when I was pursuing my degree, I did a double major. So obviously it was, in communications, and then we had to pick another major. And it was, I think, psychology, sociology, and anthropology or something. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go with the one that sounds a bit more exciting, psychology. But throughout the whole process, I just thought, psychology sounds fun and I like fun, but would not think that that was my career. Still very communications oriented. But lo and behold, I started going for classes and then communications became boring. Like psychology was then so interesting, learning about like behavior, learning about like social psychology. And then once I opened the abnormal psychology book, gone. Like psychology, like I had no choice. Psychology just grabbed me, by the shoulders and was like, we have to take you away from communications now. So I left communications behind, focused my fourth year on psychology. And then, I don't know, the path was like very clear. I came back to Singapore. I took up some internship in a mental health facility and was like, yes, this is really for me. And then I applied to James Cook. I mean, I applied to a lot of universities, but then, I had the king of my heart at that time, who is now my husband, and he was based in Singapore, and I just wasn't going to be anywhere else. And so I took up the program in JCU.
Well, that sounds amazing. What was I guess it's quite an interesting path, but that switch from communications to psychology, did you realize it as it happened? Were you like, wait a minute, this has changed?
I don't think I really realized it as it was happening, but I do remember just being hooked by, like, being more interested and being more excited to go for the psychology classes. So I think I felt it, but it was not until I had to make a decision. It was, majoring in communications or majoring in psychology. And then,
Yeah. It sounds like it would be an interesting switch, I think, just that moment of realization. And I think quite a lot of students have that realization at some stage, which is part of the reason for this podcast, is to try and, I guess, help gauge that understanding of, oh, things can change and it's okay for it to change.
oh, 100%. I guess what's really important is if you're able to follow your love, like follow the drive, follow what makes you have a smile on your face, then I feel like you can't go wrong.
And I think it's interesting anyway, because yes, you had that switch in communications to psychology, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, it all kind of comes full circle in a way. But moving from your studies to clinical work, making that progression, like we've got a few people here starting, you'll have your first year, second years, on and on. But what's that transition like when you go, okay, I've been studying and now it's the real world. Now I have to be a clinical psychologist. What is that like?
That is called a lesson in being a human being, which I didn't realize I had to learn. So I think when you're studying all the time and you are learning theory and you're reading and you're focused on getting your D's or your HDs and you're just very academic focused, you forget that there's a world out there you need to interact with, or at least that's my experience. And so I think when I then transitioned into something more implementation based, right? I now had to go meet people. I had to talk to people, vulnerable people. And I remembered just like in my first placement that I feel changed my life, because I think I had a really good supervisor who was, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I'm sure it was like, are you a human being? And I'm like, I hope so. And she's like, okay, so can we sort of help you find a way to really listen to people and get to know them and understand them? Because I think when you go through a course, you somehow think like, okay, I'm here to help people, and helping means doing, right? So you have someone come in and they're telling you their troubles, they're telling you all of these things, and you're like, do this, do this. Research shows you'll be happy if you do this. And you have someone sitting across from you going, huh? Like, I'm already down in the dumps and you want me to do a thought diary? Like, what's happening? So I think that was the biggest shock for me, finding a way to be helpful, do the things that I know research has told us is helpful for people's mental health, but then also knowing like I'm a human being with like my own worries and my own wanting to be the best, the best clinical psychologist. And then there's a person across from me who has decided that they will be vulnerable with a complete stranger. So I think that is something, if I could sort of rewind and tell myself, is it's great that you've read all these books, but now you really have to figure out a way to like be present in that moment with the person sitting across from you.
I think that's a very valuable lesson. And I guess moving on from, working in that clinical setting, do you find anything that you were doing there, any learnings? I know we were going to talk about process-based therapy. How did you find that was implemented into your clinical work? And what did you see there and move on from?
Okay, so PBT or process-based therapy is actually very new. So the first time I heard of it was when I guess I joined JCU, and my boss sort of put this very thick book on my table and was like, hey, as our new psychology clinic manager, this is what you'll be doing. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So this was in 2021 when I joined JCU. So before that, I was working in a hospital, primarily in early intervention, so working with very young children and their parents. And then I sort of wanted to change from that and moved on to JCU. So I had to really just sort of hit the ground running and learn all there was to know about this new thing. I went for, courses. We had, experts come down to JCU itself and also train us on this. And as I was using it, because it's new, you're learning it on the fly because the book came out and there's still lots of unknown. And so we were trying to sort of like figuring it out on our own. But of course, we got a lot of help as well. And so a lot of the feedback initially from the students was, this is really tough because actually it's meant to be like an advanced sort of conceptualization. And so if I can just talk a little bit about PBT, it is a conceptualization that focuses on key things that either disrupt our mental health or supports it. So for example, research has identified that, like if we have frequent, very uncontrollable, unhelpful, or negative thinking, that's definitely a key contributor to, worsening our mental health. And so in PBT, we focus on key psychological categories. And within each category, we're saying, hey, how do we identify when somebody is showing sort of a skill that's unhelpful to mental health? And how can we then turn that into a skill that would sort of, move them in a more helpful direction? So that would be like categories like obviously thoughts, our emotions, what motivates us, like where do we focus a lot of our attention on, and even our sense of self, like how much we believe in ourselves. And of course, we look at how all of these things impact our day-to-day behaviors and actions. So in a nutshell, that's what PBT looks like. And students were saying, this is great, we love it, but how do we sort of like make it usable? And then I developed some stuff and I turned the conceptualization into something I called the mental health hashtag. But also, I think in trying to help them understand the different categories, I started using Taylor Swift lyrics. And so that was kind of the progression. It was like, how do I help them understand the different categories? And somehow I just started using lyrics. I was like, have you listened to this lyric? And I'll just like play it in supervision. So it started off that way, just like an individual supervision. I'm like, look at this line. What do you think this person in this song like feels? What do you think they could be thinking? And then that kind of morphed. But then we got feedback. So we gave out these evaluation forms because I really want to keep, because initially it started off as lyrics, right? And I just morphed that into a whole curriculum. So I now have this curriculum. PBT has sort of 9 categories to focus on. So I picked 9 songs. I call the curriculum the Tortured Psychologist Department.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
And maybe we should go from, instead of having, trimesters and semesters, we should have eras.
Yeah.
I'm in my first year, first era.
Yes.
I'm just throwing it out there for you. You don't
Good.
even have to pay me for the idea. It's fine.
We'll start with debut, right?
Oh,
And then
yes.
and then when things get really bad, it'll be like we're in our folklore evermore era.
And if there's some cruel summers along the way, so be it.
So be it.
If it's got to happen, it's got to happen. But look, we're going to just have to shake it off because I really wanted to highlight the fact that I'm now going to tie this back into Monash and your communications aspect. And you've taken that, put it in your back pocket and brought it out all these years later, which I think is a great lesson to any student, that even though it might not be something that you stick with at the time, what you learn is always valuable, if you would agree.
I would agree. And you know something, I'm not sure if maybe this is the first time someone has said that to me. because I don't think I talk too much about my communications background. I think so for you to kind of summarize that for me is very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jon.
it's quite all right.
So I think like people have asked me like, okay, like why Taylor Swift? And I'm like, well, long story short, I listened to her music and I personally connected with it. And so I think especially with like folklore and then evermore, the mental health themes became really strong. And I think this ties back to what I shared earlier, where I think my initial struggles, maybe in my postgraduate program, is getting really good at being in the present moment and understanding my client. So I think that's the draw. I created this curriculum because I'm just like, let's use these lyrics to get interns to really think more deeply about, what could their client be like feeling and believing about themselves if like they had said these lines. So I have this favorite line, and it's a line from the song, This Is Me Trying. And it goes, they told me all of my cages were mental, so I got wasted like all my potential. I mean, heartbreak.
Yes.
Heartbreak. And so, through this process, like me and the students, we get to discuss like, what does this mean? Like, what does it feel for this person to be told, it's all in your head, it's all mental. And also then what kinds of thoughts could this person have that would cage them? And like, what is it to feel like you're caged by your mind, Like your body can move, right? But your mind is so powerful that it could stop you, Like you're so consumed with the voice in your head, and then you just throw everything away. Like, so we get to really like delve deep. We have this room where we have group supervision. And when I'm doing, my version of TTPD, the psychologist department, and I would say like, look at this line, and just totally what this line is about. And, somebody sort of meekly raises their hand and goes, I wonder if it could also mean this. And I'm like, oh, wow. Just like I never have thought that. So I love that so much. So please, students, like, if you're in a classroom, you have a differing point of view, please share, because we all need to be exposed to like different perspectives.
I think that leads into what I would like to talk about next, because I guess we're coming towards the end of the podcast and you've had quite an interesting career path. And, our listeners are at all different stages of their journey, like myself being that first year. So maybe taking that academic hat off, going back to some different time points again, what advice would you give to some first year students, maybe some students considering a post-grad? What would you want them to know if you could take back and give some advice?
My advice would be really cheesy. No, sorry. I think the correct word these days is cringy. As my own children tell me, don't be cringe, mom. Okay. Is do what you love. Like, it's so cringy, but it's really true. Follow what your heart desires if there is avenue for that, because you must have the drive to feel then that you want to wake up, go to work or go to whatever that you want to learn with a smile on your face. So really just do what you love, because then you can really shine. Then you can, I feel like, feel like what you do matters. I think that's very important. Know your strengths. So I think sometimes when you enter whatever world that you want, there'll be lots of things to learn, right? And you're not going to know everything. And so a lot of the focus will be on, oh, I can't do this and I didn't understand that and la-di-da. I would say, yes, be mindful of that, but also please believe in yourself and, have a list. These are the things I'm good at, because I really remember just like undergraduate, postgraduate, there'll be days where you're going to be caged by, your mentality. And so remember your strengths. Like, I love being creative. If I'm allowed to create the things I love, 100% will just happen. I don't have to be like, oh, I'm at 50. How do I get to 60 and 70? Like 100% will just happen. So if you're, I think, interested in pursuing like the field, any field, if it's clinical psychology or whatever, I think just explore openly, maybe get a job in the mental health field, read up more about the profession, talk to other people. But I think ultimately just be guided by what you desire rather than doing, I think, things to please others, like follow your heart, follow your dreams.
I think that's some excellent advice. And I think something that, I'm still discovering now is to follow my heart and, follow the passions. And I can only imagine my fellow listeners and students are probably in the same boat. So I will say, Natasha, Dr. Riard, thank you for being fearless in joining me today. And if any listeners would like to know more about your work, I have drnatashariard.com. Would that be the best place to find out more?
Yeah, they can go there and just, hit me up there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Professionally Psyched and outro music.
Thanks for listening to Professionally Psyched. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the ongoing support of our Psych community. If you'd like to show your support or if you want us to cover anything on the pod, reach out via our emails, and don't forget you can listen to full episodes on Spotify.